Call the meeting to order. First thing we'll do is we'll pledge allegiance. Please rise.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have the agenda. One change to the agenda, the last item, well, I shouldn't say last item, item number 5. Pre-application meeting with Snuffy Investments will not be heard today. The applicant will be heard at another time, so extend that. We have initially, we start with public comment time. Does anyone from the public have any general comment? You'll have an opportunity on a specific agenda item if you want to speak to that at that time.
Charlene
Until that time, please.
Scavati, I just want to make one comment and then speak on Meadows Landing.
Go ahead.
First of all, my public comment is, I guess my first question is, why are they back, Meadows Landing? But I also spoke to Terry Madison from DEP in California, PA, and I read the responsibilities of the applicant and the municipality for the sewage planning modules. And it states in the Act 537 that the applicants must submit their sewage plans with the easements in place, a certification from the permittees that the conveyance and collection and treatment facilities for use and capacities available to receive the sewage flows, and that added flows will not cause overloads within the 5 years. With an attached letter from the authority stating this. Then once approved, that the authorized municipal official would have to sign it and then send it on to DEP for approval. And they also have to have their approval from Conservation District. And they still don't have their ENS permit from Conservation, and they do not have any approvals, and it hasn't even been submitted to DEP yet. So also, I don't think that this should move forward without a development agreement. And also, I just wanted to state that they also need 110% securities for all their stormwater facilities, which is separate from Saldo. And I just wondered if you were aware of that. And then I'll go ahead and wait until Mr. Ferry speaks. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scavati.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a couple of questions before we get to Meadows Landing? My name is Jeff Bull. I'm a resident of East Washington, but I have property interest in the borough of South, in the Township of South Strabane. Right, Dennis Maple? And my first question is, who reviews the plans for anything brought forward to this board?
If you have questions, we can talk about, you have a public comment, you can make your public comment, but I'm not going to answer questions at this point.
Township engineer. Okay. Is it the planning commission engineer or the township?
Listen, you can make public comments if you want. If there's questions that you want to have answered in that nature, we can do that with staff. Okay? If you have a public comment,
Well.
you can make a public comment, Mr. Bull.
Okay.
Let me wait to look at that item, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman.
sir, I'll do that. Thank you.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Okay. Next item we have is approval of our meeting minutes for December 2nd and January 6th. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I have.
Yes.
I'll abstain from December 2nd, which I was absent.
Understood.
But I will make a motion to accept minutes as is with my abstention for December 2nd. I'll second my motion with amendment.
Any comment on the motion? Hearing none, we'll have a vote on the motion.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. No opposed? Minutes are approved. Item number 4, continued consideration of final planned residential development approval for Meadows Landing Associates LP for the Meadows Landing planned residential development located along Landings Drive and US Route 19, further identified as parcel ID number, and you can read the number, in the R4 residential zoning district. Do we have any comments from the engineer?
But like he's reloading. Scott is on.
Scott's on. We're just waiting for him to be able to respond.
I'm sorry, I lost my connection.
That's okay, Scott. I just asked, we're on the Meadows, item number 4, the Meadows Landing, and I just asked if we had any comments
Right.
from the engineer.
No, we don't. We're recommending approval contingent upon the capacity letter from Ouija.
Thank you, Scott. Is anyone here for the applicant?
Yes,
You want to identify yourself?
I'm Jeff Kessler. I don't know if there's a microphone, you try to speak. in the microphone, but I'm Jeff Kessler. I'm a partner with Meadows Landing Development Firm, seeking recommendation for the planned residential community.
Could you speak up a little bit in front? They may not hear you on there.
I'm Jeff Kessler. I'm with Meadows Landing. I'm representing the firm developing the residential development at Meadows Landing. The applicant answer any questions in conjunction with our engineer, Graham Ferry. Brad Tuck is also with our firm.
Anybody from the board have any questions?
Yeah, on that capacity letter, that's, they're aware of that, that's because of the Ouija thing or the.
Yes, I know Meadows Landing's representatives are aware. They don't have that capacity letter yet. We're aware that they don't have that capacity letter yet. And we just not sure when they're waiting on the force main project
Yeah.
to get going. They're gonna break ground this month.
On the force main project?
On the manifold force main project,
Oh, okay.
which will increase the capacity size. To get to the plant, which is needed, and that's what we just waiting for, is for us to break ground.
Once
So
they
that's
break,
what I understand it is.
okay, so once they break ground, they won't know until it's done what the capacity is or.
No, the capacity hasn't been figured out. They just haven't issued the letter yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I get, so
We were told initially a letter would be issued once that contract was approved. Contract was approved. So Region and Township are working together to effectuate some agreements, and that should be relatively soon, I hope.
Okay. All right. I was a little confused on that.
Understood.
I have a question. You know, this capacity by Ouija, this Meadows Landing has been kicked around in one fashion or another for a number of years. And this capacity issue always existed. And now it seems like the 11th hour, we're waiting for this capacity letter. To me, it seems like this should have been addressed early on. And what's the reason for not being able to get a capacity letter from Ouija? I don't think Ryan or NBR has been involved in this from the very beginning, but the number of lots and the number of houses there has for quite some time. And if this capacity issue was a issue with Ouija, and now all of a sudden when this force main or manifold road is going to open up capacity, it seems surprising that this now is an issue. I mean, to me, it's been an issue for 3 or 4 years. I don't know why it's been not reconciled. Do you guys have any?
I know we've been working for a solution with it. Graham, I don't know if you want to comment more on the history or where that's at.
Well, I really can't speak to the history of it. I mean, you know, the onus for providing capacity in this within the system is on Ouija. I mean, no applicants of any projects of this size are permitted to connect to the system until Ouija's system has capacity. Now that they've, you know, issued a contract and are getting underway with construction work to upsize the system, now they have the ability to do that. I mean, you know, per the 537 law in the Commonwealth, they can't issue a capacity letter until they can legally provide it.
Are we talking capacity in the plant itself, or are we talking capacity in the lot?
No, it's not the
I
plant.
understand.
It's the conveyance system to the plant.
So but basically, we talk about capacity, we talk about the conveyance system, not the facility.
No, well, no, there's two components to
lines.
that. Yes. Yes, there's two components. The treatment plant has a capacity. And the
Correct.
system has the treatment plant has plenty of capacity. The problem is the system can't get that capacity to the plant. And that's
So basically,
go ahead.
so basically, you're right, Fred. Every line has capacity. And the question is capacity, I guess, and I just got involved this mid-December. I'm assuming basically the plan is going to put a line in that has sufficient capacity to take care of this development, correct?
This and a number of any new developments, yes.
Correct.
Yeah, I understand that the force main project will provide an additional 2,300 units. Am I right in saying that, Scott?
That's my understanding, correct?
And so that contract has been awarded to J5. The notice to proceed, I believe, has been issued. And right now we're working with the Trolley Museum. They're aware of the project and are great partners. And we're just looking to break ground and get it done.
Is that gonna be done that way? So where's that, so that's gonna run down?
Yeah, the actual force, the manifold force main project isn't necessarily a manifold. It's more along.
Yeah. That's what down around, down Racetrack Road down there. And that'll service the,
They'll service the capacity line in that manifold sewer shed.
okay.
Oh, what's your schedule? What's your time frame schedule that you're looking for? What's your next step?
We're still working through our contracts and our bids. Our plan would be to move through phases. So we have first phase, and we're still working with potential builders and beyond, and Ryan. And once we get approval, we'd like to move forward into the first phase.
Let me get this right. On this capacity, this subdivision is not going to be, the subdivision is not going to be serviced by a force main. It's all gravity out at Meadows Landing until it gets to somewhere else. Then is it all gravity? And then this force main is going to free up capacity in the gravity system? Is that the reason?
No, this specific development is serviced entirely by gravity.
Right.
Eventually, the system turns from gravity to a pressure system when it reaches a pump station. The pump station and the conveyance system at that point is owned by Ouija. So we have capacity to the pump station, but once the flow gets to the pump station, they can't move it forward. They don't have capacity in their system currently.
Let's see.
So they can't accept the flow further upstream as a result of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
May I speak, Mr. Steele?
Engineer, have any other comment at this point?
We don't have any comment. Unless you have any other
Mr. Wolf?
questions, so.
I am a member of the Ouija board, but I'm here tonight as a concerned citizen and a property owner in South Strabane Township. I am not here representing the Ouija board. Mr. Pizzuto is absolutely right. And that maybe they can't answer the question, but the reason that nothing's happened is because they have yet to sign a developer's agreement, which is required to do the construction that they did. And because it would appear that things weren't moving fast enough for some people because they wouldn't sign a developer's agreement, the South Strabane Township supervisors, on what I would arguably say very poor advice, has disbanded the sanitary authority, thinking that that's going to change things. You know, I was here and I was one of the lead people that fought the TIF. And that was a tax increment financing plan for Bass Pro. Again, the taxpayers were left told to beg for that. The redevelopment authorities carried the paper. I'm asking you as a concerned citizen and as a taxpayer, you know, when we have a developer's agreement, we're ready to move forward. I don't know these people. Whatever they want to develop, that's fine. I don't care. Welcome to the township. But you know what? Everybody else has paved their way. And you people spent, this is what, the fifth time they've been here? And it's my understanding, is it true, sir, that your attorney said in Judge Lucas's courtroom that you folks were going bankrupt at one point in time?
Mr. Bull, this isn't a type of proceeding where you
But
ask
that's-
questions,
but
you can make
that's-
a
but-
comment.
Yeah, the comment is, you know, do it right. Do it right. Do it right, Mr. Standing. Do it right, Mr. Maple. Do it right, Planning Commission. Please. Nobody ever has to apologize when we do things right. If you don't do things right, and that contract had no business being let because the developer's agreement wasn't done. If the developer's agreement had been done, that contract would have been let some time ago. Do it right, please.
Thank you, Mr. Bull. Anyone else?
I have a,
Yes. ahead,
okay, if
Joe.
somebody else from the public wants to go first, let them go. If not, then I
Sure.
have,
Darlene Scavati.
Go ahead, Ms. Scavati.
First of all, I had a couple questions for Mr. Ferry, since he was the engineer. I was looking at some of the plans and I had some questions for him.
You,
Mr.
you
Ferry,
Ms. Scavati, you can make a comment. You can ask a question if you want, but I'm not going to require Mr. Ferry to respond. If he would like time to comment, he may have some more time to comment. But go ahead and make your comments, Ms. Scavati.
well, I thought this is what this meeting was about, that you could make comments if you had questions with the developer.
You can make comments.
Well, it's
Go
kind of
ahead.
hard, kind of talking to myself. First of all, Mr. Ferry, on the plans, you had a pumped water filter bag facility on there in between Forebay Basin 2 and Basin 2. Can you explain to me what that facility is and what it does?
It pumps water from the basin if necessary to dewater it and filters it.
Okay, and what direction are you pumping that dirty, contaminated water?
It's not dirty. It's filtered. It's clean water.
That just keeps the sediment out. I'm asking you where you're draining it.
Downhill.
Through my property,
No, to establish waters of the Commonwealth.
the intermittent stream A, the confluence?
Yes, waters of the Commonwealth.
Okay, that's just a statement. That's still an
No,
intermittent.
that's
stream.
no, ma'am, that's.
Okay,
legal
excuse
fact.
me, but anyway, that is not a natural thing, and I want the board to know what you're doing. You
That's
are not.
required, that's required
Ms.
by law.
Scavati
Now,
and Mr.
listen.
Ferry. Ms. Scavati, you're recognized to make comments. I will ask if Mr. Ferry wants to comment when you're done. I will give him an opportunity to comment if he so chooses. You may make your statements in the form of a question, but just make them all right now.
Okay.
Go
one
ahead, Ms.
que-
Scavati. You have
Okay.
the floor.
The one question is, why is the board permitting him to pump water, which is not a natural thing, which is a use, through my property? That's a trespass, and it's not gonna happen. And second of all, I wanna know, Mr. Maple, this is to you. And you've ignored me long enough, even through attorney letters. I'm gonna read this to you, and you're gonna give me an answer. It says, if there's existing points of concentrated drainage discharging onto an adjacent property shall not be altered in any manner, which could cause property damage and will not be incorporated in the plans without the permission of the affected property owner. If diffuse drainage is proposed to be concentrated and discharged onto adjacent property, the applicant must document that adequate downstream conveyance facilities exist to safely transport the concentrated drainage, or otherwise show that erosion and sediment and flooding or other impacts will not result from this concentrated discharge. They're putting 40 acres of drainage through my property, which comes from a natural recharge area. Then Meadows Landing did it with 26 acres. Now they're upping it to 40. You're trying to increase, concentrate And there's engineers on this board and they know what I'm talking about. They're taking water and concentrating it and draining it through the middle of my property. You're not allowed to increase, redirect, and concentrate without a correct flow path showing that it could even get to the surface water without damaging adjacent property. And Mr. Mako, you've ignored me long enough. I'm telling you why, under our ordinances, 195.8, 198.5 E and G, and I want to answer. I'm telling you why they're not allowed to do it. You tell me why they are. That's your job. And you're not going to ignore me anymore.
Thank you, Ms. Scavati.
I expect an answer.
Any other public comment? Yes.
Yeah, no answer.
Mr. Steele, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Mr. Ferry? Just,
Yes,
the question is a liability in terms of concentrating water.
I'm sorry, sir. Can you
Mr.
speak a
Ferry,
little louder?
Mr. Ferry.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, go ahead. I can now.
I can't answer the question because it's an engineering question. Is your development directing the flow of water onto her property?
Through a natural waterway, yes, which has been reviewed and approved by your township engineer.
That's incorrect.
It is not incorrect. In fact, I have the letters that state the very same.
I like, after that, I like to take a look at that after, I haven't looked at the drawings, I haven't seen the drawings.
Sir, your ordinance, as pretty much any stormwater management ordinance I've ever read, indicates that the peak rate of runoff cannot be increased. That is correct, which we are not doing. That's been reviewed and approved by your engineer. And the difference in the increase of the 2-year storm event volume must be held within the applicant's site, within the project limits, basically. That's also being done. And that's also been reviewed and approved by your engineer. And that's also in your ordinance.
Mr. Ferry, can I ask you a question?
Yes,
Do you
please.
actually have all the ENS permitting you need from the Washington Conservation District and the DEP?
It's under review still at the
It
moment.
has, it's under review of Conservation District. It hasn't even gone to DEP for technical review.
It doesn't go to DEP.
That's wrong.
Ms.
Colleen,
Scavati, Ms. Scavati and Mr. Ferry, the floor was with Mr. Pizzuto, who asked a question to Mr. Ferry. Mr. Ferry has had the floor to answer the question. Mr. Ferry, did you complete your answer to Mr. Pizzuto's question?
No, sir, I did not.
Go ahead and complete your answer, please.
The plans are currently under review. The permit application is with the County Conservation District right now. The County Conservation District represents the DEP in the review of Chapter 102 and 105 permit applications in Washington County. They have authority to grant permits for Chapter 102, which is an NPDES permit, a general NPDES permit in this case, and any Chapter 105 permits within the Commonwealth. These are water obstruction permits. This permit application is under review by the district. We are having the typical back and forth, addressing concerns, responding to them. It's a large development. It takes time to get these types of permits approved. No one can begin construction on this project until these permits are issued. So yes, I hope that answers your question.
Let me ask when did you submit all this paperwork to the Conservation District?
Originally, I think back in September, maybe.
September. Do you have any idea when it's going to be?
I'll be honest. I'm sorry. I'll be honest. I was hoping, actually, we've had some dialogue with them as late as today, actually. I was hoping to have, there's usually 2 stages of approval. The first stage is called an administrative approval. And after that approval is granted, they go into what's called a technical review, and then you'll receive a technical approval. And that at that point, the permit's essentially approved. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
thank you, Mr.
I'm sorry. I thought someone was speaking. once, like I said, I was hoping we were going to have that administrative approval tonight, but we still have a few minor things that we're working on with them. I'm hoping to have that actually within the next few days. All in all, I would anticipate we'll have this completed, maybe late spring, March, April, somewhere in that area.
What do you mean, what completed what in late spring, the approval process?
Total approval of the NPDS permit, yes.
Mr. Kopko, you had a comment? Or
Well,
question?
first of all, I've heard this, I've heard the thing about a developer's agreement talked about. And my question, I think, is for Mr. Stanek. I am concerned that the township is going to be exposed to liability, which has happened on other projects in the past, and it's ended up costing legal fees and more and other costs to the township on other projects. My concern here is one of giving an approval or recommending an approval for something that the applicant doesn't even have the other approvals from the other authorities, and they're not looking to have them until mid to late spring is what I just heard from Mr. Ferry. That concerns me when, as far as this planning commission making any kind of a recommendation to the supervisors to approve this project, this application. And I don't know what the status is with the developer's agreement with regard to the sanitary authority, which no longer exists, which is now, I guess, in the hands of the supervisors. And I could foresee a situation wherein if we recommend to the supervisors that they approve this application, and down the road, something happens wherein WEJA or the authority within the township with regard to the sanitary project, that it doesn't happen, or the capacity isn't there, that the township could be liable to Meadows Landing for costs or for damages. And I don't want to go there, because I have a lot of questions and nobody seems to have the right answers to why this has to be pushed through.
That's
when they're
right.
several months away from having any of these approvals. If there's a developer's agreement that's necessary, where is it? When are they going to have the conservation district approvals, and when are they going to have a letter of capacity? I don't think this thing should go anywhere until those things are all in order.
Mr. Green, can I ask Mr. Green a question, Mr. Still?
Yes, Mr. Makel.
Thank you. Scott,
Yes, sir.
the issue concerning the permits with the conservation district and all that, have you looked at the application in terms of stormwater as stated by Ms. Cavati?
Yes, we have.
Okay,
And we found the stormwater plan to be adequate.
May I speak?
In a minute, Ms. Cavati. Do you have any other questions, Mr. Makel?
go ahead, Mr. Still.
I was
We're
just
still-
going to address Mr. Cochran's comment about the development.
Yes.
And that is a great question, Joe. I think what we have when we do development in process, I don't know about development agreements the sanitary authority done in the past. I'm not aware of those. Those always stay with the sanitary authority, but I know how the township does its development agreements. And now we have to add a sanitary component to that development agreement. And that's what we're doing with Burkett Manor currently. But when final PRDs and final development are approved, they can't move forward unless a development agreement, it's code prescribed. The code comes down and says, this does not move forward unless you have a development agreement in place. There's no issuance of building permits until a capacity letter is in place. That is our code, and that is what we follow. This is a process for a final PRD that the planning commission has seen several times, as well as the board, through a pre-application meeting process, through a preliminary PRD process. So the development agreement is not a code prescribed concern for the planning commission. That does reside with legal counsel and the board of supervisors. And the development is always contingent upon the execution of the development agreement. Typically, what I've seen here is that a final PRD, or like say for Bradford Run, we've had those experiences with Bradford Run, no matter how many times they come back. But the board will approve their changes to their subdivisions and their land development plans per the phases that they've gone through.
We are.
And what happens is either the meeting or the meeting after that, a development agreement is executed because it's brought to the board with a public meeting and it's approved. And it covers all of those concerns, like the township code wants us to cover. So I just wanted to make Mr. Cocker aware that those things are covered through a development agreement.
That does not allay my concerns, Mr. Stanek, because, as I said, I've been a member of this planning commission for 30 years now, plus going into 31. And I have seen approvals come back to haunt the township with legal costs. And I think that the prudent thing to do here is to make certain that the developer has their erosion permits in place, erosion sedimentation permits in place, and that they have a letter from WEJA saying that the capacity is there before I am comfortable making a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. Now, that being said, I also would like to mention that even though at last meeting, it was interpreted that our vote was because the applicant wasn't there, that wasn't the reason for my vote. The reason for my vote was because I think that the application is not suitable for a recommendation to approve to the supervisors. And that's, thank you for the time to say that.
Mr. Steele, may I read township code to you?
In a minute, because I haven't recognized.
You can recognize everybody.
Judy,
Mine's a
to
minor
speak.
comment that's not as relevant as the discussion going on.
Judy, please tell us who you are and go ahead and make your comment.
Jeff Poole, Chapter 206, Subdivision and Land Development. Section F. No subdivision or land development shall be approved by the Board of Supervisors until the developer provides certification that mutually acceptable agreements have been reached between the developer and the applicable private or municipal authorities relative to utility system installation, maintenance, ownership, facilities, tap fees, and other related considerations. Why are we here? How many years has this project been going on? How many times have they been in front of this board? You know, why all of a sudden, it seems like now magically we think we're going to get rid of the sanitary authority and everything's going to fall into place. Mr. Stanek, or do you work for the township residents or do you work for the developers? Mr. Maple, I'll have to ask you the same question.
Mr. Boy represents the township, but that's, I'm not gonna get to that.
No, I'm just, I
No,
have
don't
one
make-
more question. Did Scott's your engineer, correct?
Yes.
And did Scott review these plans?
Yes,
Is Scott an engineer?
yes.
No, Scott is not an engineer. Scott's a registered professional land surveyor. It was also reviewed by Kevin Cray, who is a professional engineer of our office. We
And
reviewed them.
he was the one for the sanitary authority who broke his professional ethics by sending things that he shouldn't have sent to other employees of the township.
Well, I'll
And-
caution you to be careful with accusations you make in public,
Well, that's fact.
okay?
I have copies of that. And why, by law, you have to be represented by an engineer. That's the law.
KLH is the engineer. But
But Scott's not. And is it not a conflict of interest that the same engineer represent everybody?
He's the designated engineer. Mr. But
Is that not, that wasn't my question. Is that not a conflict? And is that in your best interest?
KLH is the designated engineer. Whoever is the professional that reviews it or signs his name to it, that we have to assume that he's the engineer, he's a professional engineer.
So is he here tonight representing him?
I don't think we want to get into discussion of who's the professional or not. KLH is the professional engineer. Their company, they review our plans.
Okay, well, what,
Okay,
if
now-
you folks are ever sued personally for wrongdoing, you remember you said that.
Well, they're represented by a professional.
That was said for your benefit, for your all's individual benefit.
Let me back up just a little bit. This Meadows Landing, part of the reason why it's been around a long time is the developers, I don't know who, there was other ones in the past. They had more houses, then they changed to, patio homes, then they had townhouses, then a mixture. And they kept on sort of chasing what they thought the market was.
Started out as commercial.
So it started out as all commercial, and then it was rezoned to residential. Now, and then it went through a couple iterations of residential because they were determining what was going to be the most profitable to build. Okay? And that's their business.
And I respect that. And
Yeah,
you're right, that
Mr.
is
Bull.
their business, but they know
he's got,
the
you don't
rules.
have the floor right now. Mr. Rizzuto has the floor. It's not a back and forth question and answer session.
All I'm saying is, that's part of the reason why this has gone back and forth. Now, I have to agree with Joe in regard that the Board of Supervisors should not move this forward without the final ENS permits, without the not tapping, but the capacity letter from WeJ. Now, if the Planning Commission wants to make a motion to approve this, subject to them receiving the ENS permit and the capacity letters, and it will not move on to the Board of Supervisors until they send that to us first. I think the Planning Commission could do that if we chose to, and we would approve this subject to them receiving the final ENS permit and the capacity letter. And we will not move it on to the supervisors until that time that those are in front of the Planning Commission.
That's not what township code says.
Well,
Is there, hold on. Somebody wish to be recognized?
Mr. Maple.
Mr. Maker?
If you don't mind, sorry, Mr. Steele. Is there, Mr. Kessler, is it?
Yes.
Is there a reason why you're wishing to push this through without having those permits in hand?
I believe that's just, I think that's automatically how our development would go anyway. We wouldn't be able to proceed without those permits. This is part of our timeline, our discussions with the township, our discussions with Brandon, just how the process goes. We're working through it, we're spending money, and we wouldn't be able to develop it without those permits anyway.
I mean, just time wise coming into the meetings again.
Right.
Could be,
Been here
you could
several
have,
times.
those things come in on a Monday, the meeting may not be for another 2 or 4 weeks. If technically we said we approve it, and those letters come in on that Monday, it's done, we go to the supervisor. I mean, that delay a little bit.
Well, there's a moratorium.
Mr. Bull,
by we
Mr.
got
Bull,
all
you can't
developed.
just pop in. You have to be recognized before you
May I
speak.
be recognized?
I believe Mr. Kopko was just speaking over here. Were you asking for a response or no?
I spoke to Mr.
Mr.
Kessler.
Maker? Okay.
I have a question.
I have a question
Finish.
too.
Hold on. Were you finished with your
I
response?
was finished.
Okay. Mr. Bull, would you like to be
There is a
recognized?
moratorium on all development because there are no agreements in place between South Strabane Township and Weeksville. And Mr. Stanek was made aware of it, and I believe Mr. Maple was made aware of it. Is that not true? So there's a moratorium on development. And all these years, all these projects, all these revisions, your rules never change. They just don't want to follow them. But here,
Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Moore.
I-
Mr. Maple?
Sorry. For further explanation, we did send an agreement to the council, I believe sometime in January for the review. And I believe that was middle of January, something of that nature.
For they, you mean Ouija?
Yes, Your
Okay.
Honor.
Thank
Yes,
you.
Mr. Stewart.
Wow.
I
You
was
got
I was
promoted.
in court this morning, this afternoon, so I guess I.
Promoted. I like it. Thank you, Mr. Maple. Yes, Ms. Phillips.
It's a question though, is there a moratorium on development right now?
I don't, he said moratorium in terms of sewage.
That's
In terms of them, not in terms of township.
Well, I would say that my understanding how things are right now, there just haven't been capacity letters issued. I don't think the word moratorium is probably the proper way to state it.
Gotcha,
Um,
okay. There's a
But
hole
in
right
effect,
now.
there have been, hold on, I'm talking right now, Mr. Bull. In effect, they're not issuing capacity letters, and that can certainly hold up a development project.
Okay, is it permissible?
Well, they can hold it up. It's not the townships. We just say, we don't have capacity. We have to wait until it is capacity. Like one year.
It's the permission, Dave, one way or another. It's just not out there.
It's not. I have a question for Scott. Scott, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, Scott, your letter in December, when we made the decision, it was based on a letter written that KLH did not recommend approval until a letter was received from Ouija. But in the
Correct.
letter, your letter here for for January 28th, it was changed that you do recommend final approval contingent upon getting that capacity letter. Can you explain to me why you, and maybe this was explained and I apologize for having to come in late. Can you explain why you changed that wording?
Because the Ouija manifold force main contract had been awarded.
I'm sorry.
So we were, the Ouija manifold road force main project had been awarded. So the capacity, it seems that the capacity for this development and the other developments is imminent. So we thought it was appropriate to revise our recommendation, but it's still contingent upon the capacity letter coming from Ouija. But it looks like this is within grasp.
Okay, it's getting close. Just to clarify, so it's getting closer, but there still is question. It's still questionable about whether the capacity is there to handle it, the development. Is that correct? Like the capacity.
Well, the contract has been awarded. They're going to break ground and they're going to install a new force main, a replacement force main. And once that's done, there should be no reason that Ouija could not issue a capacity letter. That's the expectation.
Okay, so that's the expectation, not the certainty, though.
Well,
The project increases capacity by 2,300.
yeah,
Okay.
once it's engineered and put together.
Correct.
It's
It
there,
should be,
it's done,
it's there.
it's done. So the engineering's already been done on that particular project. And once they're done, then it works. They don't usually make a mistake.
Okay, got the capacity there, but there's still a developer's agreement to be signed regarding some of the financing on that. Is that correct?
Not with the force main. They don't finance the force main. That's not the developer. And also,
Ms. Phyllis does lead on to something that we need to focus on with these two developments, like Project Banner that we're focusing on now, and Meadows Landing, is that now that we have the control over sanitaries being and the agreements with any kind of sanitary system, and that force main project is the township's project. What happens now is that we have negotiated contributions either all at once or over time as a phased development, as Meadows Landing is, for monetary contributions to help pay for that project either immediately or in Meadows Landing's case, they are phased. PRD over time.
Okay, and that's dependent on more than just this developer, but also how many developers are involved in that? The
We
two?
are working with Burkett Manor,
Uh-huh.
PA Finance 2, and we are working with Meadows Landing.
So, and you said PA Finance, is that?
That's the owner of the property.
Okay, gotcha.
Just Burkett Manor Development and Meadows Landing. Development.
Okay, are those developers agreements signed yet?
No, they've not been
That's
approved.
what I'm saying, yes, they've not been approved, so
Right.
without them being approved, and that financing involving regarding that for the township, I very hesitant to move forward until those developer agreements are signed, that we know that that
Those
is.
developers agreements are responsibility of the board of supervisors.
Oh, no.
Those developments, those developments can't happen unless that project happens.
If we recommend, excuse me, this is Joe Kopko again. May I speak? Mr.
Yes,
Steele?
Mr. Kopka.
Following up on what Ms. Phyllis said, of these contributions from the developers, are there signed agreements that they are going to contribute X amount of dollars to this project?
Nope.
Are they signed and are they legally executed?
Nope.
Okay, that's my point. And Brandon, Mr. Stanek, regarding your statement about that's up to the supervisors. We're a recommending board.
Yep.
And once again, I don't see how I can recommend, and I'm speaking for myself, I don't see how I can recommend to the supervisors to approve a project that doesn't have those agreements signed, because that's my point when I was saying about damages to the township, and that the potential damages to the township are that this project goes ahead. You said that, correct me if I'm wrong, you said that the township holds the contract for the force main. Is that correct?
Yep.
So the township is on, so the township taxpayers are on, they are the ones who are responsible for paying for this until such time as there's a legally executed agreement with these developers to participate in financing this this force main. And I am not willing to recommend to the supervisors to make any kind of an agreement to make any kind of contingent approval based upon something that could end up coming back and costing the taxpayers of this township more money.
Thank you.
That's my point too, yeah. There's
Well-
a financial obligation that could
Let
fall
me
upon the
talk.
taxpaying residents. If the developers fall through on their agreement, they decide not, but they get approval contingent upon that. But what's to say that they're not gonna follow through the developers?
And that's a very good point. The developers could walk away tomorrow. Right?
Yeah,
But nothing happens in South Strabane unless the project's done. Like those two of the three car washes are backed up.
well, it's not
This
our
is a
fault. though.
project, no, right.
Yeah,
This is a project that needs to happen to allow more capacity in the system, not just for Meadows Landing or Burke Manor, but for anything that we look at over the last past year.
But if we approve that, that's a precedent set that someone else can come in and they don't have to have this developer's agreement signed. 'Cause if we
Well,
do
let's
something-
talk about the
There is
development.
never
Let's talk about
been a
development. There's not a requirement at the planning commission to require a signed developer's agreement. There's not a requirement for the plan. We're not waiving anything. We don't have to say contingent on anything. There's not a requirement that there be a signed developer's agreement entered into to get a recommended approval from the planning commission. The supervisors cannot give final approval without entering into a signed developer's agreement. They're the ones that enter into the signed developer's agreement. They cannot grant final approval without the signed agreement. So that all happens up there.
Okay, so technically that is the process,
Yes.
but we as a recommending body in good conscience, do we feel we'd be making the right decision by passing the buck on to the?
Well, you're not. You can't ask the supervisors to enter into a developer's agreement, and then we'll recommend final approval if you enter in a developer agreement first. That's not how it works.
No, I just, I don't have a comfort level there to move this forward, knowing that there is not a developers agreement existing. It may not be our responsibility to have that done, but it's our responsibility to make decisions in the best interest of the residents also. And I don't feel that we'd be doing that if we moved it forward.
Well, that was kind of my question. Addressed, Attorney Mankle, what is our liabilities?
Well-
As Joe mentioned, he was worried about what liabilities would we have in regards to.
You're recommended body. That's pretty much what
Right.
you're recommended body. But if you heard me ask the question, why are we, to the gentleman about their permits, they're saying late spring. It could be June, who knows? I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I haven't looked at their application. I don't know. I haven't seen the paperwork. But sometimes an ounce of caution is, worth a pound of cure.
Can I ask Mr. Stanek a question? Because this force main is sort of the linchpin that's going to allow things to move forward. The developers the contract, the reason why KLH changed their wording a little bit was because the contract, is that awarded now? Is that out for bid?
The contract is awarded to J5 Construction.
So the contract has been awarded. Okay, well then, any government entity, they cannot award a contract unless they already have money to execute.
With the money to execute.
So what I'm hearing is South Strabane now is fronted this whole thing.
Yep.
Ourselves,
We
right?
have the money to execute.
We have the money to execute whatever, I don't know what the contract's even for, it's irrelevant. I'm just saying that the township now has put itself on the hook for the entire contract. And then we have to now have Meadows Landing, Burkett Manor. Why aren't these car washes part of this? I mean, if we're looking for them to subsidize this, then those to me are very pressing to have some kind of a payment made to the township. So the township isn't responsible for the whole force main contract.
Correct. Force main contract is.
So where are we with getting these folks, Burkett Manor, the car washes? Do we have some kind of a formula what they're gonna kick in? And
We do.
is it done, or have they ponied up the money for that?
Well, I think we're finalizing Burkett Manor's development agreement soon.
Yes, in fact, you got something today from Burkett Man.
Perfect.
But I mean, the development agreement, does it actually put money into this force main?
The development agreement will be structured to identify, articulate, and require that those funds from each project to go towards the force main project. So the township has the assets available, monetary assets available to go ahead and move forward with the project. Meadows Landing will be a phased project. They will pay over time.
I realize that.
Through tap-in fee.
I realize that it's phased.
Burkett Manor is putting in money up front. They are a one-phase development.
Yeah,
So everything that they owe will come up front. Meadows Landing will be done as it builds. And
but right
the
now,
town taxpayers will see those tap-in fees replenish what costs were put out.
And before you go on, let me say one thing too. The planning commission has never been tasked with negotiating, reviewing, approving developers agreements. Right? Ever. We didn't condition Burkett Manor on us, the planning commission, reviewing, negotiating, approving a recommendation of a developers agreement before we gave preliminary and final to Burkett Manor. We've not been asked to do that, to my knowledge, from the supervisors. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, so as far as the developers agreement go, it is my position that developers agreement isn't relevant to what we do here. Now, the capacity letters is a different story.
yes.
And the permitting, I think, can be a different story as well. That's just my position.
But I'm saying, if the township, we've already used the township money back in to underwrite this force main contract. So now, that means the construction companies will go forward and put it in. These developers can walk away. They can walk away and leave us holding the bag on this forcefully.
Yep.
First time.
Now, what I'm saying is, I think that it's incumbent upon the township, not necessarily the planning commission, to get some money up front to help subsidize this contract. I don't think the township should be assuming the liability of the construction.
You're correct, Mr. Bizzuto. So that is what Burkett Manor's development agreement will help us achieve, is a group of funding that will come upfront. We have sanitary authority, and this is, it goes to kudos to Ms. Rossi with her work with sanitary authority. Did obtain a grant through the DCED with the small sewer grant. That's worth about approximately $306,000. That's money that is upfront, in addition to Burkett Manor's contribution upfront, which we anticipate receiving after the development agreement is in place. There's so many days, there'll be so many days prescribed for them to contribute those funds. There is an upfront cost. It's a lesser amount for Meadows Landing to cover for their phase one. And then there are assets available to bridge the gap. So the gap's not large.
What is the contract amount since it's awarded? What is the contract? Do you have any idea?
Scott, is it,
850,000.
that's what I was gonna say. Thank you.
Okay. I have no.
Yes.
As far as like previous situations that we've been presented with, and yes, we've never really gotten involved in a developer's agreement, but in those other PRDs and developments that were presented, I don't know that we were ever aware of the concern of the developer's agreement to this extent that was involved in the recouping some of the money as far as this big project going on with the sanitation and the sewage. So I'm looking at this a little bit differently than.
Right.
I think it's perfectly appropriate to send a message to the supervisors if you want to, of what you're hoping that they're looking for if you want. I think that's perfectly fine. I don't think the developers agreement's in the purview of the approval portion of it, but I think it's perfectly appropriate to express your concerns. And they may be happy to have you help negotiate. Come in anytime you want and negotiate those if they want. I know Mr. Bull's had plenty of time so far tonight. I'm not recognizing Mr. Bull at the moment.
Oh, you don't want to hear the truth?
And at this point, I have one other thing I think we'll say at this point. I'm not sure what kind of motion we may get or not, so we'll say this to the applicant. I'm about to call the question is what I'm saying at this point. So I'm calling the, Jude, yes, did you not speak your?
I've never talked yet.
All right, I'll recognize you to talk, and I think you pointed.
Because I didn't want to interrupt what I just said with the.
Okay, Judy, you have your 3 minutes as well.
I do classic Green Crescent Drive. One of my concerns is that and I could be wrong on this, but that the people that own the property, this development, that they have been in violation multiple times behind Ms. Scavati's property and aren't following the ordinances as it is now. My concern is if they're telling us they're going to do stuff, it's not in order, and they're not even following the ordinances that we already have. Trusting them to make sure they're going through everything, or being a good neighbor is what concerns me as well. If you can't just cut some grass behind somebody's yard, and that's the township ordinance, and you want to put in a big development that you've been changing their mind on for 5 years, and I don't understand half this stuff you guys are saying. I mean, I try to follow along, but I understand enough to know that, and I've been in this township long enough to know and watched projects fall through and you know, Fred Burrell or what Bert Burrell come to meetings word about how a golf pile looked better than what was going to happen over there. If they can't follow the ordinances as it is in the township, if you guys can't cut the grass behind somebody's house and be a good person and neighbor and be decent about that, and you want us to believe that you're going to follow through and all this other stuff, I just have a problem with that as a resident of this township and as a taxpayer with watching everything that's gone through in the last 17 years that I've seen. And so, and again, that has nothing to do as much with what you guys have been talking about, but I think it's an important point. If you're not going to follow that one little ordinance that says cut the yard behind somebody's house that's causing them distress and dismay, and they won't do it, and now you have to do a whole huge project, how's that gonna affect the people that live around there, and are they gonna follow the rules of what they're even saying? Anyway, that's what I had to say, sorry, Tom.
Sorry, thank you, Judy, and I apologize. I know I recognized you earlier, but I forgot. We went right to Mr. Blow after that one. Okay.
Mr.
I'm
Steele,
calling the question at this point.
Mr.
We're
Steele, you
done.
said,
No, I'm calling the question at this
you
point.
said I could
Is there
speak.
going to be, is there a motion?
We have the craft one?
Yes,
Well,
let's crack.
I don't know what, I think there are concerns that need to be, that have been raised, that are valid concerns. I think they're, so if you want to make a motion to recommend for approval, the Meadows Landing Associates LP planned residential, all those words and all that, subject to the following specific conditions. One, that they receive the appropriate permits from the Conservation District or whoever, those NPDES permits, whatever. Two, that any liability for placing water on the property of the Scavatis or whoever is downhill shall be the sole responsibility of the developer, including the appropriate indemnification agreement. Three, that they enter into a developer's agreement with the township to the satisfaction of the township and make the appropriate payments to the township in terms of the tap fees or contributions. And the fourth would include Burkett Manor also. You understand what I'm saying? They need to get to that recommendation to be subject to specific conditions.
I understand what you're saying. Does anybody want to make a motion? Or that motion or not? Floor is yours, Mr. Kopka, if you're preparing to make a motion. Jay, sorry. Sorry.
No,
Sorry,
no,
Joe.
no, I'm not prepared.
I always
to
say
make a
first
motion.
names when I try and go last names, I screw.
That's okay.
And add to that thing, if you want to make that motion and receive the appropriate capacity letters from WEWJA.
That would cover under receive appropriate permits.
From WEWJ plus the Soil Conservation District, wherever those NPDES permits, whatever.
Since you haven't made a motion yet, I will say I'm not comfortable with number 2. I'm not comfortable with mentioning another development.
You don't have a permit.
Right.
Okay.
I'm fine with the Ouija developers agreement. It's in the statute, it's in the ordinance, I think, anyway. So it's subject to the developers agreement. It's fine.
Which
Was 3, which supervisors have to do it.
So
I'm not saying you can't make the motion you want to make. I'm just making, you haven't made it yet, so I'm just commenting at this point. So, but if you want to make a motion.
okay, well, we have to add 2s. 1, 3. I will make a motion to recommend to the commissioner's approval for Meadows Landing Plan residential development located along Landings Drive and US Route 19, further identifies parcel ID number, blah, 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 in the R2 residential zoning district, subject to receipt of the appropriate permits, which is the Ouija permit, the ESN permit, and the capacity. But there on that.
The Ouija's a capacity letter.
Yeah,
so-
the Ouija capacity.
Okay.
And they must enter into the developers agreement once these permits are received. And subject obviously to all the engineering comments.
Okay, so that's a motion to, was that to recommend approval
Yes.
based on those conditions? Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second? I'll second. Any discussion on the motion? Yes, Ms. Phillips.
Have clarification. If we were to table this, is that an option?
You can make a motion to table right now, and basically then if you make a motion to table it right now, it'd have to be a second to that. There's no discussion on that motion to table.
Except his motion is already on the floor and second at the moment.
Okay, yes, I just
So-
needed clarification that if we tabled it, it would just continue.
If you table it, there's a time period it will become deemed approved.
That's what I would like.
That's the problem.
That's a problem where
They have preliminary approval now. This is final. But yes, if we,
They have to.
There's
waive
a
the
time period.
constraints.
but there's already a motion on.
Yeah.
at the current position. Discussion. In the,
Repeat that motion again.
Really?
did you write
Jim?
down what you think?
I've got a motion to recommend approval to the board of supervisors, subject they receive the appropriate MPDES permits, the Ouija capacity letter, any liability for placing water on the downhill properties is Meadows Landing.
That's not it.
That's out, okay.
That's out there.
At this point,
Development agreement with the township to the satisfaction that they will make appropriate payments and subject to the engineering comments.
thank you. Mr. Kopko, were you about to speak?
No, I'm finished.
Okay. All right, I hear you, no more comments. All
Well,
in
there-
favor of the motion,
Aye.
say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say aye.
Aye.
All right, the motion fails. Table's open if there is another motion to be presented.
Now that we turn down that motion, I'll make a motion to table this until such time as we can see where the developer comes with these necessary permits. Agreements.
But the applicant waiving time.
With the applicant waiving.
You have to
Again,
consent to that in writing.
Hold on.
what, just right, when you make a motion to table, ask for a second, there's no discussion on the motion to table. So you're
So-
tabling that, so Mr.
I'm
Pizzuto
making a
table.
motion to table.
Now ask for a second, if there's a second to that motion. to table.
Second that motion.
Don't, we need to talk about it.
Wait, can we talk? Wait.
Hold your second, if you would.
But we talk after there's a.
Listen.
second.
You withdraw your motion for a moment.
I'll withdraw from it.
All right, he's withdrawn his motion for the
Okay.
moment. Let's discuss this for a minute. You might want to ask them, before you bring a motion to that, if they are willing to extend the time period in writing and come back. If they say no, then you might want to change your motion. That's right, that's my point.
I'll withdraw the motion,
So,
if that's the case.
You may ask them, if you want to ask them.
Fellas, if you want to give us a time extension, we'll table this and see where you are on that.
We can't agree with that.
Understood.
But-
So, yeah, good.
The other permits you're waiting on, you don't anticipate getting them until like March or so anyway, correct? And
That's
you can't,
what Graham had said.
right, and you can't move forward without those permits either, correct?
Right, but we can move in towards the board of supervisors and pass the planning commission. We can table it Many times.
But then the board of supervisors, there's still a developer's agreement and the Ouija capacity letter. So tabling it another month, how, is that really gonna hold you back from anything? Maybe. you can
No.
move forward with the developer's agreement.
Right, this is how we, the typical timeline of development. As it's been said, the developers is within the purview of this. We were asked to come down here again tonight after the table repeatedly.
Who asked you to come down?
Well, I'm just saying, to this meeting with, these not brought to our attention before.
Who asked you to come down to this meeting? It was on.
I'm just saying, another.
Oh, yeah, get him, Paula.
This is
Guys.
a typical situation with the Ouija situation, so I don't think we can really call this typical or ordinary. So this is kind of extraordinary.
He said, "Who asked
That's
you?"
why we're asking for the time.
Who's that?
extension to be able
Just
to
but who has
exercise
to?
in a proper way.
Three times.
For your best interest too, you know. So,
I think we've asked, they've said no. Is there another motion? Is there,
If there's no time extension granted or tabling, I'm gonna make a motion to not recommend to forward this to the Board of Supervisors in total.
is there a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. 3-2, motion carries.
What's the motion?
We're making them hold it.
Recommend
Okay,
not to
next
approve.
item we have is staff update. Which is who's the staff
I'll
update?
Just wanted to give you an update. We had last month, we had a few applicants. They were not prepared to come back tonight, but from my conversations with them over the last month, they should be on the agenda next month. That would be the Americo Real Estate Company. They're trying to get a text amendment to allow self-storage units in C2 district. And then there's also Pancratos, which you're all familiar with. They will be at the March meeting. And that's staff update.
Okay. All right.
That's it. Then I'm
That's
making
it.
a
I will-
motion to adjourn.
Second. Okay.